Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our program. Today's sales conversation is about achieving the do or die mindset. So let's begin with an important distinction between do or die on the one hand versus best efforts on the other hand. When I was a teenager, my parents coached me and said, we want you to try new things, and as long as you give it your best effort, we're happy. Well, that's best efforts. What I discovered when I started my first business, a sales agency, is if I'm trying to open new accounts or make material changes and with existing accounts, and if I give it my best efforts, I will fail 100% of the time. It's a do or die operation. It's a do or die operation. Now, do or die means being totally committed, mind, body, and soul, whatever creativity and effort is required to achieve the goal. So do or die could seem a little scary at times, right? And yet there are times when it's absolutely necessary. And I have found that the do or die mindset can become a strategic resource. Now, what we're looking for typically in our selling is to create trusted advisor relationships. When we're doing business development at the outset, the competitor is the trusted advisor, and they have a much easier time of it. It's like they're rolling the ball down this slanted hill, and we're trying to kick it uphill. If we do good business development, we level the playing field. That's what we're trying to do, and become a trusted advisor. And what we're going to explore today is, could the do or die mindset be a strategic resource towards achieving this goal of becoming a trusted advisor? Let's look at an example. I started my first business with the expectation of recurring revenue. I was working for a company. They had kind of like an orphan product. It was a container, a decorative container. And I went outside, straight commission, and they turned all the accounts over to me. So I was able to do projections and figured I'd have recurring revenue. So what was the assignment? This is a lard can. Years ago, we cook, we bake with lard. It's a white gelatinous mess that went in this tin. You pick up the handle, you put it on the stove, you liquefy it. Then you cook, you bake. Food tastes great, clogs your arteries, you die young of heart failure. Now we have oils, so this is now an obsolete product, and the assignment was to turn it into a decorative tin. And again, we start with recurring revenue, and then a crisis hits. 3 months after startup, approximately, before we actually shipped any product, biggest customer, 80% of the sales dropped the item. It was a promotional item. So now I'm in a crisis mode. This is how I learned the do or die principle or mindset. So had a very rough couple of years. Second year of the business, I'm closing business, but replacing 80%, this is difficult, right? And then in the second year of the business, I discover an amazing prospect, Bunty Candy, factory on the left, candies shown on the right. They would take these candies, pack them in those decorative tins, and ship them off to retailers. This was $1 million account. If I could close this account, my business would take off. I called on the buyer, and the buyer said, we're good. And at this point of my career, some time ago, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know what to do. That year, the second year, was a tough year. I was losing money. My savings were being depleted. My wife was pregnant with our second child, who's fine now, but at the time, the pregnancy had some challenges, and she had to go on bed rest. We lost her income and insurance. And then in the summer of that second year, the engine had cracked on my car. I didn't have a car. I was facing failure. I was an emotional free-for-all. If you've ever seen It's a Wonderful Life, think of George Bailey at the bridge. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. You may reflect here on what you would do. Have you been in a similar situation? How do you handle it? Time permitting, by the end of today's webinar, I'll discuss my solution, how I solved this problem, and it led to 10x growth over the next 4 or 5 years. So the do or die principle is important when a black swan event strikes. Think of the recessions that we have faced over the last 40 years. They seem to come every 7 to 10 years regularly. One is not related to the other. So if you're a student of business history, you know that every few years there's going to be some kind of recession. On top of which, you have the product life cycle. I've had the unfortunate experience of seeing product life cycles that were 3 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old. So when you're afflicted by these things, you probably need a do or die approach, right? So do or die makes sense when the entire business is at risk of failing, right? Maybe, there's a new salesperson who's told he or she has 90 days to make the cut. Maybe you have a tenured salesperson who's lost a major customer with commission implications. So that makes sense, But what about when times are good? Is there a reasonable way to ascend to the do or die intensity? I submit we should always be in that mindset because we don't know. We don't need to wait till a black swan event occurs. Now, I've been teaching for over 30 years. I've taught thousands of salespeople. And one concern that comes up amongst mature salespeople who've been selling for a while is they don't have time for business development, especially cold calls. So one thing I would definitely recommend you do if you haven't already done this is brainstorm time-saving techniques because you're probably going to need more time in your day. Now, 2 questions you might ask yourself is, what's the most important thing to do right now? Maybe not get a cup of coffee. And is what I'm doing making me any money? One program I like is called 10 before 10. What it means is make 10 business development calls before 10 every day, making it an atomic habit. And manage your magic moment of access to your benefit. This is for folks who are really cramped on time. What do you do in the magic moment of access? What is the magic moment? You've met the client's needs, you're in communication with them, you shipped an order, sent a blueprint, a quote, and the client tells you they're delighted, no other needs, and now you have a magic moment of access. What do you do in that moment? This is a great place to take a do or die attitude to shift from project management mode, which means, hey, is everything okay, to selling mode. So what can you do in this moment? Well, if your client has pigeonholed you, if they're not taking advantage of your entire line, they buy A but not B, this is a good moment to talk to them about breaking the pigeonhole. How about trying another item? And perhaps as important or more importantly, to ask for a warm introduction. If there are departments or divisions, facilities within the company you're not currently selling, could they introduce you? And can they introduce you to a non-competitive prospect? This is a good place to take a do or die approach, and in my experience, very few salespeople do this. Another place to do it is at the end of a sales interaction. So this is a way to condense the selling cycle. When a prospect expresses interest, ask this question. Glad to hear you have this interest. Is this something you want to fast track or back burner? Right? So this sets up important questioning or follow-up. For instance, if they want to fast track it, okay, well, then the next thing we need to do here is we need to meet with the whole team. Let's get out your calendar and let's book a meeting. Now, this is an example of injecting do or die into your normal interaction without taking a lot of time. Now, does it take a do or die approach to be committed? Let's talk about being committed. Here's a case history. We have a consultant. Consultant really needs to close a sale, has a prospect. The owner of the business owns 5 businesses, invites the consultant in for a 3-hour meeting. Good meeting, gets invited in the next day by the divisional president where the consultant would work if hired. Another great meeting. That night, later that afternoon, gets an email from the owner who owns the 5 businesses. Hey, we had a great interaction. Could you send me a proposal? Now, the consultant had come to the conclusion that this was the kind of an owner, a buyer, who's a price buyer. And if you say $1.90, or if you say 80 cents, they say 50 cents. So the consultant felt that the owner needed to check him out, check some references. So said, hey, I'll send you a proposal. This is via email. I'll send you a proposal, but first, could you check some references? Owner sends back an email saying, after I get your proposal, if I'm still interested, then I'll check your references. What would you do at this point? Would you be committed? Would you go all in? This is what the consultant did. Wrote back and said, look, I know you like me, but you probably got to know, do I play nicely in the sandbox? What's my work ethic like? What's my creativity like? You really need to talk to some of my clients. It's actually part of my proposal, and I just do that first. I know you're too busy to check references now, but if at some point in the future, sometime in the future, you have a sense of urgency, please check references, and I'll be glad to give you a proposal. Well, don't you know, that owner, who was a tough hombre, started checking references within 15 minutes, hired the consultant, and ultimately brought that consultant into 2 more businesses where it was a fit. Now, what that consultant requested was a PIK, a payment in kind. It's what the prospect does to show they're committed to the process. And it's a way for you to go all in your selling. So payments in kind is what the prospect does to show they're committed to the process. It's different things in different businesses. It could be asking for an introduction. It could be asking for a meeting with the boss, the CEO. Could be filling out a credit application. So the key is earning the right with bold vision and then bold behavior. By the way, this is a great formula. If you're not getting what you want in a situation, ask yourself, were you bold enough in your vision? Were you bold enough in your behavior? Now, a special application here for going with commitment is if the prospect asks for a price concession and you're willing to make the price concession, like it's built into your pricing, always ask for something in return. Never just give it away. Ask for some warm introductions. I once made a very small price concession and I asked for 10 warm introductions. One led to a customer, small customer, who then referred me to what became my biggest customer ever had at the time. Now, obviously, this has to take place in the context of a process. This is our standard sales call. 1 to 7, you warm up the prospect, and that earns the right to the fact finding. Once you do the fact finding, you can determine, is it a fit, and you prove your case and close the sale. Let me highlight some important parts here. The freebie. The freebie is the wisdom you give where they don't have to buy from you. It's not self-serving, and hopefully it sets up the mindset where they'll listen to our bold vision statement. The combination of wisdom and bold vision is how we earn the right overview here to the PIK, the payment in kind. But this only works if you marry bold vision and bold behavior. So another way to frame this is, are you pushing the envelope enough? Are you taking enough chances? Here are a couple of thought questions to think about and to bring back to your team. What was the boldest action you took this week? And if you're coming up with bold actions, level 2 is, where did you go all in this week? For instance, where did you ask for a PIK and not do anything until the prospect delivered on the PIK, the payment in kind, to show they were committed to the process? Well, I guess we have time to tell you what happened at Bunty Candy. Just as a reminder, started a business, recurring revenue, everything looked great, and then lost my biggest customer, 80% of the sales. I had a bold vision. It was the artwork I had. But Bunty didn't want my bold vision. So here I am, going down for the third count, and I ask myself the question, who's the real decision maker here? The ultimate decision maker is not Bunty, it's the retailer, the food buyer at the retailer. So with my last marketing money, I sent out my bold vision to the food buyer at 400 retailers. And I got lucky, or I wouldn't have this story to tell. One of them showed interest. Can you guess which one it was? Well, if you guessed Walmart, you were right. And they wanted it now with urgency. Now, when I reflect back on my experience, this was an early experience, I find it helpful to think of the Bunty Candy scenario and the do or die, because by thinking about it, and no matter how good things are, I always see myself in this perspective. It keeps me from facing disaster, and I encourage you to consider it. So here's the breakthrough formula for the urgency. The bold vision, the compelling reason, and the proof that you authored lead to a breakthrough. It takes the conversation from safe, which is usually what's your best price, to serious, maybe you can meet my need. How do you know you went from safe to serious? The PIK. So when you do a pipeline review, here's a great opportunity. What's the PIK? And then there's a time element. When do you want it? And when did Walmart want it? They wanted it now, so there was urgency. Bold vision, bold behavior. So as we come to the end of our presentation, remember you typically need a do or die approach to open new accounts. Best efforts are not enough. I find being in a do or die scenario can be an underappreciated strategic resource. If you face the kind of time constraints that most folks face, focus on the magic moment of access and asking for PIKs, payments in kind. But you remember, you got to earn the right to it. And use the formula for the urgency, bold vision, bold behavior, and proving. Well, Rome wasn't built in a day. We're almost at the end of our presentation. In a moment, I'll take questions if you want to use the chat to send in questions. I already see one has come in. You might want to think about the takeaways that you had from this presentation, if any. Any questions? I'd love to hear from you at andyg@urgencybasedselling.net. Our next webinar in about a month, on November 20th, is breaking through sales barriers, opening new accounts faster. It's actually 7 ideas to open up new accounts. So now we have about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes for questions. If you want information about our standard sales call, which I showed you, or our battle plan, which links sales calls together, write to me. We have a 15-minute executive briefing on state-of-the-art in selling for top executives. If you'd like a link to our webinar on defending your key customers from competition, send. Okay, so we're going to now see if there are any questions, and then I have a last comment, and we're going to wrap up. Let's see what we have here. Are you telling me I should start worrying when my business has been rock steady for 20 years? I would. I mean, I think that's our job. Our job is to look down the road. All right, Andy, if we take this approach, does this make you bulletproof from black swan events? In other words, you'll be able to survive. And by the way, I don't know if I made it clear, but once I had the breakthrough at Bunty, I had 10x growth over the next 4 or 5 years. But does this approach make you bulletproof? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. We're not omniscient. We don't know everything. This is not guaranteed. It's just stacking the odds in your favor. It's an entrepreneurial approach to life. Why does it help you overcome black swan events, taking this approach? That's the question. Well, the answer is that you're always looking for new possibilities. You're not resting on your laurels, and you have new categories to open up, new things that could come to fruition. Next question. Couldn't you be turning off some customers with this so-called bold behavior? Yes, you could. You could be turning off, or rather prospects, but your sales will increase materially because you'll bring it to closure. I went into sales to delight my customers, not give them a hard time. This seems very controversial. Is it really necessary to be controversial? And that'll be the last question I'll take for today before the last comment. And I think the answer is, if you're going to be in business development, which can include selling new items to existing customers, yes, you have to be prepared to be controversial and challenging the customer's thinking. You can be in a related area. You could just do customer service and maybe get away with without being so controversial. A last thought before we wrap up. The difference between urgency and interest. Interest is a response to marketing. I want to find out more. Urgency is action. Urgency is the province of selling. That's why we call this urgency-based selling. So with that thought, focus on the urgency. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you next month when we continue our discussion with 7 ideas to open up new customers faster. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great day. Have a great month. Bye now.